Hi everybody, this is Vijay. I'm a NorthSouth National Team member and a coordinator for webinars. I'm really glad to see you all here today and hope you're all doing great. We are today revisiting our important topic, which is near and dear to our heart. That's bridging the generation gap. This is going to be our fourth session, and you can watch all our previous session recordings at our NorthSouth YouTube channel. We are really pleased to have a panelist of professionals here who would share their professional experience, talk about steps you can take to start bridging the gap, and give us some guidance too. I'm really glad we are able to bring this in today. Welcome to yet another exciting webinar. Also, I would like to request you that if you have any suggestions of a webinar requirement, or you are able to present a topic, and then, or somebody who can present a topic, please let us know at webinars@northsouth.org, and then we will take it up with them, and then we will pursue that information. So let's move on to the scheduled program, which is about bridging the generation gap with nurturing an environment of openness, trust, and respect at home. We have very accomplished panelists here to talk about this information with you. Much further ado, I would really want to invite our moderator, Dr. Prasad Kaipa, to us. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome him as a moderator. He has been an instrument in bringing this topic and all these sessions to you all, and he is very passionate about this topic. He has also conducted and participated in several such sessions in various community organizations for the years. He's also, he also doesn't need much introduction from us because he has been always participating in our webinars and giving us a lot of encouragement to this. He is a member of the NorthSouth Executive Board, and he speaks frequently in conferences and retreats, and co-author of many books on business entrepreneurs and other things. So we are really glad to have him here, his expertise, and we welcome him, Dr. Prasad ji. So without much further ado, here is Dr. Prasad Kaipa.
Thank you, Desi. Namaste, everybody. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend so far. As Desi mentioned, we have a lot of passion towards bridging the generation gap, especially because the Indian American kids and parents of the first generation who have spent now significant amount of time. Some of them got married in here, some of them have young children. As we notice from the poll, there are about 20% of the people who are attending have got adult children here, and about 60% have got teenager children, and rest of them have got school-age children. So that means the attendees today seem to be quite a bit are parents. As you know, in past several years, the pressure that parents feel, pressure that the children feel, because we are straddling two cultures at this time, it has been incredible. And because of that pressure, in addition to COVID, in addition to several other kinds of situations, economic and other kinds of downturns that we are going through, the mental health issues have become prominent. Because of that, we find there have been unnecessary and also unfortunate incidents that are affecting the health, and some children actually even going to the extreme of taking their own life has taken place. Because of all the kind of pressures that parents and children of Indian American generation is going through, we wanted to create conversation between the adults who came from India and who are growing their children, and the young people who are born and brought up here, and the kind of pressures that they are feeling, we want to generate much better conversation. As Deshri mentioned, this is the fourth conversation. We had a broad session first, then we had parents talking about it, and we had children talking about their experiences. In this particular webinar, we are focusing on um, specialists, mental health professionals, and health professionals who will speak about how to nurture an environment of openness, trust, and respect at home. So the focus of this particular webinar is going to be for parents a lot more. And I have wonderful people here who are actually going to be presenting. So let me start by introducing first Dr. Vijay Susarla. Dr. Vijay Susarla has actually uh, kind of conceived this particular session. So I want to give a special credit to her. And she is a practicing clinical psychologist with office locations both in Naperville and in Chicago. She has been in practice since 1995, and she practices self-improvement through awareness. That is the practice name that she goes under. She founded Manodarshan with the goal of eradicating stigma and promoting mental health awareness in Indian American community. She conducts mental awareness presentations once a month online, and she creates mental health awareness workshops once a year as well. And she has done over 150 community mental health presentations in the United States as well as in India. And she is spending a lot of time researching this particular topic, in addition to many other topics that are related to Indian diaspora in the United States. And she just completed a study of impact of COVID on the depression and anxiety situations in Indian populations in the United States. Welcome to this session, Dr. Vijay Susarla. Then we have Dr. Priya Kundu. She is a practicing psychiatrist in New York City. She works at New York University, and she worked for an NGO serving homeless as well as underserved population. She also has a private practice in addition to teaching in NYU, where she counsels adults struggling with various mental health concerns. Before she moved to New York, she did a 2-year fellowship in Rwanda and through Partners in Health, who focus on direct healthcare services all over the world. She was also instrumental in setting up a mental health facility policy, training local providers in Rwanda. She enjoys working with people from diverse populations and a variety of backgrounds. And she is a first generation Indian American, having been born and brought up in United States. Welcome, Priya. Then we have Dr. Gita Shah, who is a retired pediatrician. And a special kudos and thanks to her attending, especially when her family members are going through some serious illness right at this time. And Dr. Gita Shah started practicing pediatric medicine in Mumbai. After that, she worked in United Kingdom, Canada, and then she migrated to United States after marrying Mahindra. She started her private practice in pediatrics in the East Coast, and even though she worked in primary care, her interest as well as fellowship has been in the developmental and behavioral pediatrics. She recently retired after 45 years of practice, and she did it just before the COVID pandemic hit the country. She has 2 children. Both of them are married, and she is the grandmother of children as well. So she is juggling. She and her Mahendra, her spouse, are both of them are following their professional careers and dealing with the children who are dealing with their professional career. Welcome, Dr. Gita. Thank you for being here, despite all the things which you are going through. Kali, as she is familiarly known as Meera Tanikela, she is a therapist licensed in California, and she teaches as an adjunct faculty member in the University of San Francisco. She, in addition to practicing the therapy, she is also a practitioner of Bhakti Yoga and belongs to a Guru Parampara. If these two are not enough, she is also pursuing a PhD in Hindu theology in GTU in Berkeley, and she is interested in historical coherence, colonial and intergenerational trauma, and decolonial and indigenous solutions for modern problems. She is a wife, she is a parent, first generation immigrant, having grown up both in India and States. She also had a family situation last night. She just heard her grandfather, beloved grandfather, passing away last night. Despite all the things that are going on, Kali is here. That shows her dedication, just like Dr. Gita. So welcome, Kali, and thank you for being in this seminar today. With that, I would like to start with the first question to Dr. Vijay Susarla. So, Dr. Vijay, we are talking about essentially nurturing an environment of openness, trust, and respect at home. First, can you tell us what are some of the features of an open environment at home? Can you start with that, please? I would love to you take it over and move forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, NorthSouth Foundation, for including me in this wonderful series of webinars. Most of my experience comes from my clinical practice and with my friends and relatives, extended family. So that's where most of my knowledge comes from regarding this. I've been in this country for over 30 years, and I've seen a number of kids, adults, families. And really, we're talking about this because parents and kids seem to have communication issues. One thing is that parents who create open environments they're not necessarily more loving or anything like that. All parents love their children. It's more the communication rather than the emotion within. So they're not necessarily good people versus bad people. It's not that. They love their kids like anyone else. So openness in a family implies that there are certain principles parents think about and apply in their families. Now, one of the basic principles is that children are inherently good and they're inherently capable. Now, imagine the opposite. If we think children are up to no good, and unless we do something, they won't be capable and they won't be successful. So how we behave automatically shifts depending on the basic principle we are operating from. So if we think children are inherently good, they are capable, our job is to get out of the way and just, it's like preparing the soil for a seedling. So our job is to prepare the soil and let it grow by itself. If we have that, and to have this perspective, to have this principle in mind implies that parenting is extremely thoughtful, that you take your time to figure out how we want to parent our children. these parents also know that kids inherently want to please their parents. No matter what they're saying or doing, they really are intensely wanting to please their parents. And an open family is where parents recognize that they have to grow first. Before they raise their children, they have to raise themselves. And what does that raising look like is what they need to think about. So parents are not perfect. These parents are aware they're not perfect. And it's okay that they're not perfect. And they're also aware that their children will not be perfect. And it is perfectly okay for them not to be perfect, because such is the nature of life, on this earth. These parents also are aware of the developmental stages of the child. Our parental behavior should differ based on the age of the child. And they are keenly aware of the strengths and weaknesses of their children. So right from the time of birth, they're observing their children carefully to see what their strengths are and see what their weaknesses are, discuss it, make notes, whatever is needed to become aware of who their children are and their strengths and weaknesses. And these are the parents who will play to the strengths of their children rather than try to beat the weaknesses out of them. Okay. These are the parents who are also aware of the cultural gaps. They left their countries and came here, established themselves. That requires an enormous amount of courage and hard work. And they have done that. But they also need to invest some time in understanding the culture they are living in, and the culture that the sapling is going to grow in. And unless we're, so much of what I hear in my environment is that parents are criticizing the dominant culture and saying their culture is the best. Now, all cultures have good and bad and everything in between. So unless we're aware of that and know that we have to be an active participant in this culture where our children are growing, it doesn't mean adapting everything that they do. It just means that we intelligently figure out what applies and what doesn't, and how we need to behave so that our kids become good adults, good citizens. So the nature of this open environment is one of reassurance. Parents are always able to reassure everything will be okay. Between all of us, we have enormous resources. Mom has certain resources, dad has certain resources, children have certain, we have enough and more. So we all together, we will be able to take care of things that come up in our lives. So resilience is much more important than anything else to teach children that what is of importance is to be resilient. These parents also know that they are the authorities in the house. So they need to own that authoritativeness and not be scared or anxious about things. If I know already what to expect developmentally, and I also know what to expect culturally, then I'm prepared. Therefore, I can set standards, principles by which our family behaves within and without. Right? It is one of reassurance. Always when kids are upset, parents want to reassure them. It's okay, we'll figure this out. Take a moment, take a deep breath. We'll all sit down and figure this out. Okay. This is an environment where mistakes are made, and it is perfectly okay to make mistakes. It is better to make mistakes here at home rather than in college tomorrow. So mistakes are welcome in this open environment because it is a teaching moment. Then learning is more important than grades. Grades are a byproduct which tell us how much we know. But if we are stuck with grades, we lose learning. In fact, yesterday in my office, a kid told me, "Oh, all I care about is grades. I don't care to learn." Now, this is the kid who's going to go into the world and bear the world on his shoulders. So it is very important for parents to know and teach the kids that learning is a much more important thing than grades. And an open environment is where open discussions take place. And kids are not scared to talk. An open environment is solution-oriented rather than problem-oriented. I have seen this over and over again, that parents talk about problems rather than solutions, because majority of problems have solutions. Very few problems that don't have solutions. Therefore, you teach them how to problem solve and then how to accept those that cannot be solved. So an open environment, a nurturing environment teaches this to the kids. Now, this is an environment where yelling doesn't happen. Yelling and screaming and putting down and disrespecting does not happen. Having said that, most human beings yell, and it's okay. Two things. One is, if it happens on a regular basis, on a daily basis, that is simply not acceptable. Here and there we yell at each other and we go out, into our rooms and come back together and everything is okay. That is okay. So this is where parents are not scared of emotions. And they teach children to not be scared of emotions. It's okay to be angry. Whether it's okay or not, all human beings experience all emotions, period. We don't have a choice, really. So they teach kids that it is okay to have emotions. It is even okay to yell here and there, as long as you learn something from the whole interaction. So it is more active rather than reactive. This is a place where parents talk less and listen more. And this is something that the greatest challenges I have to teach parents, to listen more and talk less. They ask a question and they supply multiple choice answers. And the kid who's fed up and doesn't really want to do this will pick one of them and move on. So it is extremely important to ask a question and be quiet till the answer comes. And I really have to say, Mom or Dad, you asked a question, be quiet. Please listen, wait. As long as it takes, wait. And there is so much research showing that a positive environment, in a positive environment, emotional levels are lesser. Okay. And in a learning environment, emotional levels are lesser. This is an environment where, as I said, all topics are discussed. No topic is taboo. Not only all topics can be discussed, I think parents should make an active effort to discuss every topic that comes up into their children's lives as they're growing up from elementary school, through college, through marriage, through life, really. There are so many topics parents avoid: alcohol, drugs, sex, gender, sexuality. A whole host of topics are simply not discussed in the house. If you don't discuss in the house, we'll be foolish to think that they won't know about it outside. So it is better to discuss them in the family, explore what each of these things mean and why something is good, bad, or in between, or whatever it is, whatever the values of the family are. So the values of the family can be passed on to the children as long as there's no yelling, the constant yelling in the house, as long as children are able to talk freely and without fear, and where any topic can be discussed within the family. So most of the people that I come across, whether it's in my office or outside, they're so worried about academic success. It is important to know that as kids go through adolescence, this is a crucial time where they're finding their own sense of self, they're finding their own identity, and it is important to nurture that identity, right? It is important to know that kids will have peer influence more than parental influence, and that's because they want to develop an identity of their own besides the identity with the family. Therefore, they will reject parents. Expect that, and don't be too scared about it. It's okay. So to be able to know and expect these things and be prepared for how to react to them without yelling and screaming, with them. So I think I had about 10 minutes. So I'm going to stop here, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. We can't hear you, Dr. Kaipa.
I think we will hold all the questions later. Gita, let Dr. Vijay, we can proceed with the next one.
Yeah. So if that is the case, then Dr. Priya, what can you tell us about how to create a trusting environment? What can parents do to increase the trust levels between them and their children in the home? Can you speak about trust, please, for a little bit?
Sure. So thank you all for having me on this panel. It's great to be here. So I wanted to first talk about how trust can mean a couple of different things for parents versus children. So for parents, there's often this notion of trust me, I'm your elder, I have the experience, I know what's best for you. And then for children, it's you have to trust me because I want to learn and grow and figure things out for myself. And like Dr. Vijay said, develop my own identity, figure out who I am, what I like, what I don't like. And so I think it's important to sort of really kind of hold both of those definitions of trust in a conversation about it at home. Trust is room to make mistakes. I think often parents want what's best for their children, and they really want the children to not make mistakes because the parents often struggled to be in a position where, they were able to immigrate to this country and they want the best for their kids. And so they want their kids to be able to really reap all the benefits of that and not struggle and make mistakes on their own. So this is allowing space for them to figure out what they like and they don't like, what they're good at, what makes them happy. Sometimes kids are going to make the wrong choice for them, but the only way they know is to try something, whether it's, a particular major in college, a hobby, a career choice, a friend group. So, Indian parents do have this desire to minimize the struggle for their children, but sometimes this can limit their freedoms and they don't really get an opportunity to figure out what they want, what they like, who they are, what their value system is, all of that. The other way to really foster an environment of trust is to refrain from micromanaging. So micromanaging is really this tendency to oversee what children are doing, if they're doing it properly, to really keep tabs on everything that they're up to in their life. And this can really get in the way of them developing a sense of identity and independence. In sort of the more Western culture, it's about really creating an identity, developing a sense of independence. Basically, by the time you're age 18, you're off to college, you are sort of really kind of encouraged to create your own sort of identity by then. Although, not always, but I think that by really preventing this from happening or micromanaging, you know, oftentimes they don't really get a chance to really develop their identity by that time. And this is also, you know, with their choice of friends and subjects and careers, similar to what we talked about before. So do's and don'ts. I think what we should do is be curious. So why are they choosing a specific career path, hobby, friend group that maybe, you know, the parents don't feel is really, you know, something that they would do or something that they think is a decision that is very wise to them? Why does the child want to do this? You know, what is the underlying issue going on? You know, maybe they're really struggling in school and in science classes, and you know, they really are enjoying some of the other coursework in the arts or literature, and you know, that's why they want to pursue that path, or really anything. I think it's just for fostering an open communication, open and honest environment for communication, and listen. You know, Dr. Vijay talked about this as well. Really listen to what they have to say in a non-judgmental way, trying to understand their point of view, really trying to allow for open conversation at all times. Don't assume anything. Being older and having the life experience doesn't necessarily mean that you know what is best all the time. The world is constantly changing and evolving. The world as it is today in 2022 is very different than the world that it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There's a lot of things that children these days are exposed to that they weren't exposed to before. There's a different kind of culture almost with social media and everything. So I think it's really important to embrace all of this and to not assume that you know what is really best at all times in the current culture and climate that we live in. And, you know, don't violate the trust. If you say that you're going to trust them, then do it. You know, if you don't feel comfortable trusting them about a certain issue, then initiate a conversation about your concerns with open communication, instead of just simply saying no, or, you know, not giving a reason of why you're hesitant in that situation. And I just want to add, you know, this isn't really about parent bashing or anything in any way. You know, children also have to respect the adults, and adults do have more experience and wisdom. They do want what's best for you. Your parents do want what's best for you. And it's important for you to have an open conversation about what your experience is like when boundaries are set. So for example, if there's a boundary set for, you know, you have to be back at 9 p.m. for a curfew when you're, you know, an older teenager and most of your friends are out a little bit later, maybe just having an open conversation, you know, this makes me feel like you don't trust me when I'm out with my friends and we're just having, you know, a nice time and socializing. Other people are able to stay out a little later. You're so insistent I come back early. That doesn't make me feel good. So just having an open conversation about that. And understanding that violation of trust can result in consequences. You know, this is what creates accountability and respect in relationships. So if your parent is trusting you with something and you violate that trust, or you don't do what you say you will, then there is a reason the parents might, you know, may not give you as much freedom the next time, and you have to earn it. And so trust is usually earned and starts small and grows over time. So I think that is also something that needs to be you know, discussed and talked about. It's not just about, you know, it's a two-way street. And again, the real underlying tenets in all of this is openness, communication, curiosity, listening, and really trying to foster an environment where people can feel free to talk about what's on their mind. So those are the main points that I have. And I'm happy to answer any questions also in the end.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priya. And now, Kali, would you like to address some of the things about how can we create respectful environment between parents and children. How do parents engender respect? And then after that, Dr. Gita will also take over and speak a little bit more. Can you start the conversation on trust, please? I mean, on respect, please.
Thank you so much for inviting us and for having this really important conversation. I just want to start with that. I think the thing about respect is, again, in our culture, respect is seen as you don't say anything back, right? When you're a kid, the expectations are, you don't say anything back, and you just listen to your parents, and that when you do that, that means that you're respecting them, right? We want to change that definition a little bit, shift it just a little bit, because if we have that kind of safety that Dr. Vijay was talking about, the kind of openness and that kind of piece of discipline and everything that Dr. Priya was talking about, then this is the consequence. Respect is a consequence of that, right? So that's how we want to think about respect. Respect is, again, just like trust, it's earned, right? You cannot demand it. And what that means is, first of all, how do you interact with your parents, right? A lot of times, when we interact with our own parents, our kids are learning from the way that we model it, right? So how do you interact with your own family members? How do you interact with each other? How does dad interact with mom and mom interact with dad? What is the tone that is being set in general within the family, right? That's a really important part. And it's really about communicating in a way that understands both that we are dependent on each other as a family, but that we're also our own people, really. So it's kind of balancing both of those elements, right? We're not totally separate, just kind of doing our own thing and not related at all. But at the same time, we're not fully dependent on each other. There's a part of us that's just us, right? In our tradition, we would call that, whatever the divinity within you is, right? I always like to bring in that sort of perspective as well because of just my background and what I study, right? So there's a very famous mystic who often says, your children come through you, they're not yours, right? And a lot of times what happens is, in a family system, there needs to be a hierarchy, there needs to be a structure, so there needs to be boundaries, but there needs to be this kind of flexibility to those boundaries, right? So people aren't stuck in their roles. I am dad, you listen to what I say, and mom listens to what dad says, and everybody just dad becomes this authority figure. When we model that, then kids feel like it's an imposition. And you cannot impose and demand respect, right? As opposed to, maybe dad knows well, dad can do this really well, I'm going to take the leadership position in this. Mom does this really well, she's going to take the leadership position in this. Really, like Dr. Vijay was talking about, kind of playing to the strengths of everyone that is involved in the system, right? And really, a good system, a good family system should bring out the best in each individual member, right? It should sort of kind of bolster some of the weaknesses that each person brings, because, hey, we're not perfect, we're all human, but at the same time, it enhances the strengths that we bring in. So that's really what good respect and boundaries can do. And really, for me, the core of that respect is because we all say Bhagwan sab mein hota hai, God is in everything, that's a big part of our, especially if you're Hindu, but in a lot of dharmic traditions, that's a big part of dharmic traditions. But what does that mean really when rubber meets the road, right? What does that mean? Do we really practice that when it comes to our own family members? Do we really practice that when it comes to our own kids, right? So it's respecting that aspect of them that doesn't belong to us, right? There is this expectation, this back and forth, this kind of back and forth that happens, but at the same time, it's not a do this or else, right? And that's a really, what that really does is loses respect. So that's a really important piece to focus on. And, good parenting is high support and high expectations. In our community, we do high expectations really well, but sometimes what we struggle with is the high support, right? The trust, the openness, the communication. And, Dr. Vijay and Dr. Priya both talked about resilience, right? How do you build resilience? Not by protecting kids and never letting them interact with their environment, right? What you do is let them go out, but you're there to support them if they fall, right? So they learn. Like, you let them, because this is an important piece, because a lot of times it can feel like, oh, individuality, it's so American, identity, it's so American, all of this stuff. But here's the thing, if your kids don't develop that while they're with you, tomorrow when they go out, they're not gonna know how to make decisions, right? So they're going to look to whoever's next to them or whatever media is telling them, or they're gonna be influenced by a bunch of different things. They're not gonna be able to have their own values and have this internal sense of direction. That's why identity is important, right? Because you want these resilient, strong, flexible adults, like young adults who know who they are, right? Who know their values, who know where they come from, and who understand that they can make their own decisions, right? And they're not just kind of falling prey to whatever messaging is they're coming across, right? So, and whatever pressures they're facing. So they're able to withstand those pressures by building this resilience while they're still with you. And the way to do that is you let them try their strength, right? They push themselves, maybe sometimes too much, they fall. Then we help pick them back up, and we figure out, okay, what happened there, right? What happened? Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is where things went wrong. Maybe this is something we can try next time. So this kind of supportive conversation around failures, as opposed to, wow, you're a bad kid for doing that, right? Failures can often feel like this insurmountable obstacle, whereas it can really become an opportunity to learn and to grow and to develop, learn that muscle. And we all know what resilience looks like because we face it every day. We have to have resilience, or we wouldn't get out of bed, after the couple years of COVID that we've seen and all the struggles that have come with that. For us to show up every day and to be authentic and to face up to life, we need that strength. We need that resilience. And it's super important to be able to cultivate that in them. And really the way to be able to do that, and that respect, the trust, the communication, all of those are extremely important elements of that. So I hope that gives you some specific ideas, but also some general ideas about earning respect, giving respect, and just fostering an environment that is just rich in respect.
Thank you, Kali. Excellent point. Now, Dr. Gita, can you add your perspectives on respect in the family and how parents can generate environment or create environment with respect?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm new to the webinar and conducting the way these people have been doing it. And I'm more for, actually, I'm kind of trying to be a lawyer for the younger generation and trying to meet my generation, the first immigrants who came 40, 50 years ago. That was really very different era, and we came from a very different background as opposed to what is now. I think to be fair to our generation, we've gone through a tremendous amount of transition from the time we came from India to now. And so much has changed: technology, communication, science, art, everything has changed in a very, which was used to be very same for decades on. And so I think that adjustment, just to be fair to our generation, that adjustment has been very tough. And so I think those who have done well, and most of us have done very well actually, is they deserve that credit. I really want to tell the parents that it's not all the things that you're doing wrong or you're not understanding your youngsters. Yes, you're not understanding your youngsters, but that's because of many reasons. And the youngsters have to feel accepted. We kind of almost remained professionally successful and doing well in the society, but then we, by and large, our generation went back to our cocoon when we went home, and we kind of remained whoever we were coming from India, which was not very healthy for our children. And I think they began to develop, especially in the first decade, it's very difficult for our children to sort of see what the parents like, come home and just do what they've always done. But they see differently with the David and the John and the Lisa and Gina, what they do. So we were not open to all that. And I think we need to realize that they are growing up here. We kind of forget that they're growing up here. They're starting, like Dr. Vijay was saying so well, that we just have to have that seed grow and blossom and flower. And that's been very difficult for us. I'm just kind of being very open to say what are the mistakes we have made, not because of anything, but it is safe to come back to your own comfort zone. Once you're out in the public, you are proving yourself. They always say you have to be, when you go to another country, or another culture, or another environment, you have to be twice as good to prove yourself half as, to work twice as hard to prove yourself half as good. So we were so focused on proving ourselves. And some of the times we really overlooked what the kids were going through, our children. And then when they didn't, the typical way in which we would react to it, as Dr. Preeti was saying, we would just kind of criticize them and say, that wasn't right, or instead of saying, sitting down and saying why they think the way they think. So I think many of these mistakes we have made, I would like to just kind of show what we have done, and we can still change. It's never too late to change. So even if we did this with our children, now they are adults in my case, and so now I have to give you a very nice example for my grandchildren who are really very young. The 2.5-year-old was clearly testing his parents and doing things that they didn't want him to do. Clearly they had to show, but then they did it the way I felt, well, A, B, and C they shouldn't have done. So I tried, and my son immediately said, well, you know, Mom, you have done what you did, but we have to make our own mistakes and we have to learn to be parents. And I thought that was so true. And I kind of had to step back and not like, I know what you should be doing to a 2.5-year-old. So that's really, I mean, as a grandparent, it's even harder because you've done so. And I said, one thing only I have to give a message, that when the child has made a mistake, you explain to the child that he or she has made a mistake, then create an environment that this mistake is what we are going to learn from. This is not your failure. This is not what you're learning from this mistake. And actually, my other grandchild was 4 years old. Once I told him, because the parents I thought were kind of a little harsh, trying to show him what he was doing wrong. And I said, you know, Beta, you have to realize that they love you. That's why they tell you this. And he kind of looked at me and he said, yeah, I know. And I know I'm learning from it. And somewhere along the line, one of the parents must have said that. And I was so happy that he realized that he was not being chastised for what he did. And, you know, he's learning from it, which is so true. So, and one other thing I tell parents now, coming to this country, I think we have learned to compare a lot, and we shouldn't. Dr. Vijay was saying that, and I reinforced many of the things she said, that we are very focused on achievement. Oh my God, my child has to go to medicine and has to go to science, you know, whatever. And really, because we only knew those things when we came from there. There were only 3 areas we could go to, like almost. And now there are multiple areas, multiple, you know, sort of opportunities. We know that intellectually, but we don't accept that emotionally. So really, they have multiple choices, and please allow them to make those choices. But we are still stuck in our old ideas, so it's very hard. So I think I would really second that thought, that, you know, and I think humor is one thing I'm very big on. I feel that if they made a mistake, turn it into a humorous situation. And now you're learning with fun, right? You know you can do this will, or whatever. And the second thing is choices. we were not used to giving choices to our children. You're wearing, I have planned my day for tomorrow. Last night I took out everybody's dresses, I made everybody's lunch, I did da da da. So next day, of course, the child doesn't want to wear that. And then you start first thing in the morning, you're running late. This kind of thing. And I think we could avoid that. We've got such set ideas that we should get away from that. So pick two dresses, the red and the green, both of which you think is okay. Then the child feels she's in control. She's picking the red one because she's given choice. Not that she'll go to the closet and find out 10 other ones, you know, that will minimize your conflict with her. So I think those kind of giving choices, making it more fun, humorous. And one other thing I think is so important, when you make a mistake like today, please say, admit that, say that, oh, mom goofed, right? Mom didn't do the right thing. And just kind of in a funny way. And they realize that mommies and daddies also goof off, or they don't make the right. And I think it's very important so they feel more, like she says, you know, Dr. Kriti says, create a safe environment. So we don't create a safe environment. We meaning my generation. I really want to point that out, that the kids are scared. They're scared to give their opinions. And I think it should be important that they can give their opinions. And if they didn't like something, let them say they didn't like it. And then, like they say, you know, like Kali was saying, explore the reasons why they don't like it. Oh, I understand you're angry, but then tell me why you're angry. Otherwise, the kid, no, it's not nice to be this way. You behave badly. And it's also very important to say, you are not a bad child. Your behavior was bad. That for that particular incident. And that's very important also. You don't kind of, you're not crossing out the child as a person. You just kind of pointing out his or her error and why. And also, like Dr. Kriti says, we don't even give them a choice to say why. And they really should. We don't. I think we came from, I think we are holding on to some of the things. Majority of them are good values, but majority of them have to be thought twice. We have to revisit them. That because this is a different environment, different culture. And we came on our own choice. These kids don't have a choice. They want to really grow and be part of this society. So make it happen. You know, and I think so I'm kind of speaking for our generation where we made mistake, and there's still plenty of time to change. It's never too late.
Thank you, Dr. Gita. Really appreciate clarifying various points regarding how we can bring respect into the environment. I just want to check, you know, even though we started out with environment, respect and trust with individual panelists, are there any comments that each of you want to make on the other person's topic? Is there any point that you want to add for other persons? Like Kali, you have something you want to add? And then we will go through each of you, and then we'll take questions after that.
So I just really wanted to highlight something that Dr. Gita said. I think, you know, what she said, the difference between you are bad versus you did something bad is so important because that speaks to shame versus guilt, right? Shame is you are bad. Once you are bad, nothing you can do is good. Like there's nothing that, so it's like an irredeemable state of being, right? It's this, you are forever stuck in shame. And shame is actually a huge factor in many mental health diagnoses because it causes someone to isolate. So people hide, they become defensive because they're bad. They'll never show themselves, they'll never open up, they'll never be honest because I'm bad, right? So there's this, shame is toxic. Shame is destructive, right? Guilt can be constructive because it's a sense of, oh, I didn't study, so I messed up this test. So next time I need to do a little bit better, right? As opposed to, I didn't do well in this test, so I must be just the dumbest person ever. Like if the difference between those two thoughts, right? There is hope with guilt. And there's hope for change, there's hope for learning, there's scope for future growth, right? As opposed to with with shame. Shame is just an completely, sorry. Shame is something that you can't recover from. So I just want to really highlight that point that Dr. Gita said, and then pass it along to the other panelists.
Excellent. Any other comments, Dr. Vijay, Dr. Priya? Dr. Vijay, you want to say anything more about other topics that other panelists have covered, or you have any additional points? You are on mute, Dr. Vijay.
Carol Dweck talks about not yet.
Not yet. Yes.
So, the idea of not yet.
Yes.
You know, if a kid fails and does not know something, the verbiage is so important. If you say, yes, you don't know that yet, versus you don't know it. You know, and she has actually done a series of studies, even in Chicago schools, where this verbiage has been included by teachers to kids, and saw how these kids, whether they had a growth mindset or a rigid mindset, based on how the teacher speaks about something. You know, and she says, if a kid is disappointed, if a kid fails, does not get good grades, the idea to say, yeah, right now you didn't, implying that there's still time, and you know that you will be able to, and that is so much more reassuring for a child than anything else.
To second that, I would like to just say, Dr. Vijay said it so well, that yes, you didn't do this well, but sometimes a child is actually not good at certain things, period. I mean, he doesn't like mathematics. What do you do? Well, he's excellent at art or piano or something else, sports. So try to highlight what the child is good at all the time, whenever you are pointing out what they need to improve themselves on. And I think that whole sense of self-worth that the child will develop is so important, especially as they get to be in the preteen and teenage. They need to have that feeling, you know, and I think we tend to forget that, and we don't always remember when we are pointing out where they can improve themselves.
Dr. Priya, you want to add anything?
Thank you. I don't have anything specific to add except just to echo what everyone else has been saying and all the points that have been brought up. I think there are a lot of underlying themes in everything that we're saying. And, you know.
There is one point I want to add based on what Kali also brought up. The idea of guilt, shame, pride, these are in Judeo-Christian religions are used as a certain societal control mechanism. I call them personal GPS, like a guilt, pride, shame. GPS works very well with a global positioning system that helps you and your phone and your car to know where you are exactly. So for the societal control and family control, bringing the guilt feelings, and some of them are connected with all of the panelists talking about I am bad versus I did something bad. It is important to differentiate the agency versus the action that was done. We all make mistakes. I think that's the reason why when some of the panelists talked about, when I think Dr. Gita talked about, when parents make mistakes, if they can say, look, mommy can also screw up, or daddy can also screw up. If you can bring that and show it to them, and that you don't have to be perfect. The context of perfection creates unnecessary and unrealistic expectations in people that can create certain amount of guilt, pride, and shame. So to prevent that, somewhere where you talk about grace, and especially Dr. Vijay talked about Carol Dweck. Carol Dweck says, don't appreciate oh, you have done well. Don't appreciate the result. Don't appreciate the grades. I think she touched upon it earlier also. Don't just say, oh, you are so smart, you are so good, you are so intelligent. These are some words that people take them to the heart, and that will put them into a fixed mindset. If I am so smart, how come I made this mistake? If I am so good, how come I can't do this? So that affects their self-confidence, and that affects their self-esteem issues. So the best suggestion, which many of them have mentioned, is to be able to focus on the process. Ah, you have really worked hard for this, didn't you? Now that you have put in 100% of effort, you know what? I don't care what marks you get. I don't care what results you get, because you have given your best, and that's all I am asking for. So if we can focus on the process, if we can focus on the hard work, and if we can create a situation where you tell the truth, that doesn't necessarily mean you repeat the same story 100 times, because then the children will say, Dad, you have told that so many times, I can tell that story better than you can. So that situation means they have stopped listening to you, you stop listening to them. And I think there are some excellent points that have been made by each of them. And now let us take some of the questions which have come about. There are two questions that I already see right at this time. One question is about, let's see, here, uh, thank you, doctors. Wanted to know how to handle kids about religious things. Like, they don't want to go to temple, they don't want to participate in spiritual activities, even though they have been brought up in such an environment. The change has happened here, looks like due to peer influence during the middle school. Is there any way to overcome this? Because usually it leads to arguments, and the whole purpose of going to the temple, for example, is completely ruined. Who would like to take this first? Okay.
Go ahead, Kali.
Go ahead, Kali, and then Dr. Vijay will take it after that.
I really want to kind of highlight that especially dharmic religions are very focused on utility, right? They're basically providing tools in order to interpret life in a way that gives you resilience. So I would say focus on the utility, on religious whatever. That's a really big piece. Why is this important to me? Why is this useful to me? And a lot of these religious functions and religious places do not feel like kids don't want to, because they just don't see how it impacts them, and whether it's useful to them, and why they should even participate. So one of the big things is having your own practice. Dharmic religions and Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, all of those fall under that umbrella, are not just about going to the temple, right? Are not just about wearing a sari like twice a year, right? It's really about this like daily practice of centering yourself, like having a practice, whether it's yoga or spirituality or something or the other, of like centering yourself, and then doing this like deep reflection on the choices you're making and what you could be doing better, right? So there's this kind of, that's a central piece of the practice that's built into it, and that's a piece that's often missing from the conversations around religion, especially because it's not prescriptive, right? Dharmic religions are not prescriptive. There's no commandments. There's no, do this, don't do that kind of thing. Even though it's become a little ossified and reified in that way, it isn't. In our shastras and all of our texts, that is not all how we're oriented, right? So one of the big things is for parents themselves to really discover how dharma, how religion, how that has positively impacted them, and share that with their kids, right? And practice it and model it for them. And that's once they experience what it brings them and how it enriches their life and how it brings resilience or psychological growth or this growth mindset. And self-respect, right? They adopted themselves. You know, this is something that cannot be imposed. It has to be adopted by them. And I'll also say this, Dr. Vijay really talked about this really beautifully, but developmental stages, right? So if these kids have grown up in this way and they're kind of just rebelling, trust the process, right? They're supposed to sort of like wander a little, find their own path. I did it. Hey, you know, I did it. And for me, like, I came right back because for me, like, in my work through psychology and my studies, I found that Dharma provided a framework that was best, most conducive to psychological wellness, right? So, so for me, like, that's where I found my own utility in it, and that's how I related to it. But that's what's important is your own individual relationship to spirit, right? Because and that's what it is really about choice. In those choice, right? You just what kind do you want ritual? Do you not want ritual? Do you want postures? Do you want breathing practice? Do you want meditation? Do you want to go to the temple? Like there's all these choices that we're just not aware of, and we do. What's your devata? Like, do you like Shiva or Vishnu or whom do you like? Like, let's figure it out. Like, there's so much choice. It can almost be overwhelming, but that's something that parents can help kids navigate, right? But they have to have the awareness. Yeah.
Excellent. Ali, Dr. Vijay, you have anything, or Dr. Priya?
What I noticed in kids is that when the kids are young, they love the ritual.
Yeah.
They have to, you know, put various things, light the lamp, light the agarbatti. They really like to do that. They enjoy that.
Right.
And if you couple that with daily reading of Puranas and things like that, that will also enhance their interest. Another thing I notice in children is that, which is documented in developmental psychology texts, is that they want you to repeat a particular story over and over and over again, the same story. And, you know, these religious mythologicals, they're so rich in symbolism, in what they wear, how, you know, how they sit, what they sit on, what their vehicle is, what color clothes they wear, what they hold in their hands, how many hands, how many heads. There's so much there that it is very fascinating for a child. If you're able to sit with them and talk about this and talk about the, you know, tell stories. You know, we have such rich stories. Yeah. So that has to happen. Now, if that has to happen, the parents should know themselves. What has happened in Indian history is, since the Mughal invasion and then the British invasion, all those things have been shattered completely. To an extent that India today, the adults actually do not know the basics of the religion. We might, whatever our parents did, we do it in our homes, and I want our children to do in the homes. But they don't have a deep understanding of what the religion is in order to be able to pass it on to the next generation. Now, as long as they're little kids, everything is fine. Now, once they hit adolescence, this is when they start asking questions. How can somebody have 10 heads? And I actually had a kid in my office saying, Kali is, well, Kali, you have to forgive me. Kali has killed, she's so violent. How can you ask me to pray to that bitch? You know, that is the question she asked. And I want the parents to answer that question. You want to encourage those questions and answer those questions. This is what I see happening even in the groups where kids go. Sooner or later, the teachers are telling them, well, you need to do that because the scriptures say that, or the Gurudev says that. Now, that's not going to fly with the kids. You have to explain. And at every stage, from ritual to philosophy, there is a progression. And that progression, parents should understand in order to impart to the children, you know. And Kids are supposed to rebel in adolescence. It's perfectly okay. Please let them go. If you have established in childhood certain practices and told them all the stories and all those things, in adolescence, if they want to go off, let them go. Believe it or not, most of those kids come back. They want to, because after they try to identify with the dominant culture and see that that identity is not complete, they come back to their own identity and try to incorporate both of them. So if they want to not come to the temple, let them not come to the temple. But the parents should continue talking about these things, discussing these things in the house, in the earshot of the kids, you know. So religion can definitely be taught to children, and it should be taught because it's one of the greatest support systems that human beings have. Whether it's true, untrue, all these things are separate. It is so useful to the human mind. In my practice, what I'm seeing, a lot of young girls, adolescent girls say, I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
And adolescent boys, I notice, are saying, I'm an agnostic. Very striking how, they're describing themselves. It's okay. Hinduism is filled with texts that are agnostic. Nothing. That's my take on it.
Dr. Vijay, it's so beautiful that you said that, because I think we as parents don't realize that you said what you wanted to say. When they were young, you told them to do Diya and this and that, whatever, and with fun, most likely. And then they ask, why does Ganesh have a head of an elephant? And supposing you couldn't give a good answer, I'm just giving an example. Well, let's make it a project. Let's kind of find out why Ganesh happens to have and we still worship Ganesh, and why does he have a head of an elephant? I mean, this is a very simple, basic one, but let them be seekers. Let them be seekers. So what you said is so true, that whether they went to a temple, whether they did this or that, and so many of our kids who are now adults are marrying in other cultures, and there are good things in other cultures. So we really have to encourage this, the idea which Hinduism actually believes in, to be seeking, like you say, from rituals to the philosophy, constantly be seeking, and they will find their own answers. You're right, they will go away. It's like a rubber band. You provide a pole, the rubber stretches and then comes back. They have to find their own identity.
Thank you, Gita ji. And Dr. Priya, you have anything to add before we move on to the next one?
Sure. Everything you said really resonated with me, because that had been my experience in life, enjoying the stories and the mythology as a child, and then questioning it in my adolescence, moving away from it, becoming an atheist, and then coming back and becoming more agnostic. So I think that, trust the process, and I think open conversation about why you're doing things, not just because that's the way it is really important. And the temple serves as a community as well, and some of my closest friends in life are people I grew up with, who are Indian, who I went to temple with. So that's also very important to keep in mind.
I have also just one point which I want to make. I found, depending on the age group, like Dr. Vijay said, younger people start with stories. Imagine like a superheroes. Many of the children are interested in Western superheroes. Introduce gods as the Indian superheroes. So that comparison works very well. Like a Marvel's, Avengers we have here, compare them with some of these, or Japanese, if you have, or Teenage Ninja Turtles, or whatever kind of characters you have, try to compare them. That is one. Once they go beyond the story phase, they will start asking difficult questions when they are in teenage. You Krishna, you say he is the god. How could he ask Bhima to hit on the thighs or kill Karna when he was down? The problem with those questions is many of us parents don't know the answers.
Yes.
then
We don't.
that is when we say, don't ask such questions. You should not ask such questions of gods. That's when we are losing our credibility, and we are actually helping them to break their understanding. So the most important thing at that time as a parent, when children ask questions for which you don't know the answers, the most powerful thing would be, I'm going to do research on this. You do the research on this. Let us figure out who will come up with some answers that is satisfying to each other. Then if you can create that competitive spirit for them to learn and teach it to you, then you see you are respecting them, you are trusting them, and you are actually treating them as adults. And like Dr. Vijay said, you are teaching them as leaders in your life, not just you are always the leader in their life. So depending on the age group, respecting, allowing them, and then having the rituals, having practices, having conversations, and having meditation or something else, some of those type of things, if they can recognize that you go there because you want to go beyond your ego, there is somebody whom, like there is something higher power. You don't have to call it God, you don't have to call something else. If you can help them to design that there is something higher than our own ego, when we can surrender to that, whether we call goddess, God, by different names, when we can surrender to that and trust the process, universe will provide something else. And that way of universe providing the feedback to you is what we call spirituality. Organized spirituality is the religion. And why we respect the Hindu religion is because there is a philosophical tradition, and there is a what you might call a do this, do that kind of a tradition also. Like Manudharma Shastra is equivalent to probably Quran or Bible to a certain extent, but there are in some Upanishads, there are some specific things. Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, like that. There are some to-dos and not-dos. But the key thing about Indian philosophy is about asking. Upanishad means to sit beside and inquire. So the idea of like Kena Upanishad is all about questions. So the idea is to say there is nothing that you cannot ask. There is nothing that you cannot question. Let us discuss it. And if I don't know, if you don't know, let us find out. That collaborative inquiry approach, if you can get them closer to you, and maybe you will learn a lot more about religion and spirituality from them, especially if you go forward. Let's move to the next question. There is a question that says, if we have already messed up with our parents in some things, is there a professional help that we can seek? So can you address something about what is the kind of professional help they can seek? Are any of you open to, what kind of things are you open to receiving clients or patients? Or are there some other organizations or people or groups that you refer them to go and seek help? So who would like to take that first? Yeah, Dr. Priya.
I can just start by saying, first of all, I really commend you for acknowledging that maybe you didn't do something the way that you were supposed to. I think just owning up to it and
Yes.
and really expressing that your limitations and where you were when you made that decision will really mean so much to your children to receive the that apology, not necessarily even apology, just to acknowledge that you wish you did things differently. I think that's so important to just even communicate that in the first place. There are definitely resources. I mean, there's family therapy, which can be very, very helpful to help build communication between parents and children, parents between husband and wife, mother, father. I mean, there are a lot of resources to help really develop a more nurturing and fruitful environment with better communication. Individual therapy can be very helpful. if the parent wants to pursue it on their own, because usually this isn't just one thing, you know, there's these issues probably also translate in other areas of their life. So it's not just the parenting that's the issue. So, you know, individual therapy for both the parent and the child might be helpful. I think even just recognizing your own limitations with what you do know, what you don't know, and what you could use some help with. So that's really all I think it's really important to acknowledge our shortcomings when they happen.
Do you accept new patients, Dr. Priya? And you are in New York, I take it, right?
I'm in New York. I do. I don't see children 18 and over, but I do. I have I can send my psychology to file for anyone interested in the New York area.
Okay.
I'm
New
licensed
York.
in New York, so.
Thank you. Dr. Vijay?
Yeah, I think like Dr. Priya said, individual therapy, family therapy are really very useful. If you want to start, the first thing to do is to back off and not add more fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Now, even if the kids are so upset that they're not willing to listen to even your apology, then you should not do what doesn't work. The fundamental principle here is do not do what doesn't work. The question is not whether what you're doing is right or wrong. The question is whether it works or does not work. Okay. So first stop doing what doesn't work, back off, give space to the children, and after you know few weeks or whatever is proper, you can approach and say, you know, I know I made some mistakes. You as parents, we made some mistakes. I want us to talk through this, and the child has the permission to say no, I don't want to talk about it right now. At which point the parents must say, I respect that, and just know that I am open, and anytime you feel ready, you can come and talk to me. And of course, professional help is of use, and you know, that's much better. Somebody who has cross-cultural awareness and understanding will be better.
Just one thing to add, with Dr. Vijay said that the person who asked this question, I'm not sure was mentioning it for his or her own parents or for his or her own children. But the people from India directly have tremendous amount of stigma of seeking the therapy. It's one of those things that we didn't grow up with, and we just feel like, I'm not crazy, I don't want to go to that sort of thing. And I think we need to get that out also, because we will not be able to help if we just feel like I'm kind of beyond going and finding help for it. It's one thing to find a therapy for a headache or a fever, but it's quite another thing to find anything for your emotional issues.
Yeah, excellent point. And by the way, Dr. Vijay practices in Chicago area and in Evanston area?
No, Naperville.
Naperville area. So in case you want to contact, you can contact her. And Kali works in California area. You want to add something, Kali?
Yes. I just want to add.
You are not coming through clearly at all.
No.
Now, little better, yeah.
What can also be helpful if they are at least a little bit open is to start by sharing maybe some of your own childhood stories, right?
Yeah.
Start by disclosing your own experiences and maybe some of why.
Not coming through.
Okay.
Not coming through.
Why choices made. Okay.
No.
So start by sharing your own experiences, and just help them see that you are fallible and human and open, right? So if you show vulnerability, they're going to be more willing to be vulnerable as well. And be more open to exploring things. So I think just starting the conversation off that way. Sometimes it's really useful to have kids in the car and start conversations then. When they're not facing you, they're like sitting next to you, it's like less threatening. Or if you're watching a movie together, this is a great tip in general, by the way. If you're watching a movie together, and especially if you want to talk about some of these like topics like sex or alcohol or something like that, if there's something going on, then you could be like, then you can start a conversation about it because it's like a natural segue into it, right? So those are just some tips to sort of keep in mind if there's difficult topics that you want to bring up and can't find a right time to bring it up. So.
And you do private practice in the area of eating disorders with adolescents. Is that what it is?
I work with so eating disorders is like one part of the practice. I generally see kids and adult families of who are struggling with identity, a lot of what we're talking about. So generational gaps, parents wanting to get kids some help, and just wanting to explore their own stuff. So it's really that's the majority of my practice.
Okay. Thank you, Kali. She is in California, by the way, Northern California. And I also want to invite Shivam. Shivam is a person who is also working on some of the mental health issues because he is a second generation person who grew up here, and maybe there are some things that he can add based on some of the questions which we are raising. Shivam, you want to add something?
Yeah, definitely. I have two main points that I want to touch on. The first one is with respect to therapy. So I've been doing therapy for 2 years, and the act of trusting somebody who you don't know is very scary, especially if you have a lot of trauma. I've always had difficulty trusting people just based on how I grew up. So there are a variety of fantastic workbooks out there that could be really helpful. Workbooks and journaling and whatnot as a first step. So yeah, it's like you gotta like see what you're comfortable with in sharing and find somebody that you can trust. I think a lot of immigrants might also feel more at home speaking with somebody of like South Asian descent. I've spoken about this with my parents, and I think they have some general skepticism towards the Western method. I still don't know what the Western method is, but they feel more comfortable with like somebody who has more of a Vedic approach to psychotherapy. There's this one guy named Dr. Alok Kanodia who I remember reading about him. He was quite good. Another point I want to make is that so I'm actually part of this Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families group, and we have one specifically for South Asians, South Asian diaspora in the United States. So I could share the link to that. I go to that every week. I'm going to go to that tonight. It's really helpful because I can talk about my own struggles, but also, there are a lot of things that come with being Indian and understanding the family dynamics, as well as like growing up in the States, because racism is a very real thing. I've struggled with racial identity my whole life, so I can talk with people there. So that's another option, and I'll make sure to send the link to somebody. And I guess the second point I wanted to touch on is that it's often very hard for men to do any sort of therapy or share emotion. I know for myself, like I've lived my life with like this constant like muscle tension, armoring, trying to basically keep people out because I just assume everybody's going to attack me. So sharing myself is very scary, and I've been at this for 2 years. So it's always a work in progress, but I think I've also spoken about this with my dad. My dad was also very, like I guess a tough guy in a sense. And I've had to change my perspective on what it means to be strong in terms of like, I can tense up and like brace myself for difficult situations when it's necessary. Like if I have to bring somebody to the hospital or like make sure something gets done. Yeah, I can like flatten my emotions if I need to. But I think, true strength comes from also being able to like kind of hold that inner child of yourself and say like everything's going to be okay because you have that internal confidence that Like if somebody does come and say like, oh, you're a baby or you're whiny or something, or they try and emasculate you or
Or
something.
the men don't cry kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's okay to cry. I cry multiple times a week. It's the best thing ever. Like, my God, I wish I'd started doing that before. It's really good for you. And yeah, it's okay. Yeah, that's something I've wanted to talk more about, but I'll leave that for a future session.
I think
That's all.
important.
Shivam, it's very important that you said that. It takes a lot of courage to show your vulnerability.
Right.
You have to be brave to be able to do that, really.
Yeah,
Especially Indian men, I found that when you cry, people don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Indian women, Indian men, many of them actually kind of stop at this. I have seen it in many companies when I work with, or the expressing emotions in a context, people become very uncomfortable, and then they will look at each other, or they will make comments, or they will just move on from there. It is extremely important point that you are bringing, Shivam. The idea of especially our children, we need to teach them it is perfectly all right to be vulnerable. It is perfectly all right to be able to cry, to express your emotions, to express your vulnerability is actually a strength. If you don't feel that strength, you will not open up. And opening up is not just something like, especially when you mentioned, oh, I cry multiple times every week. I'm sure there are lots of audience going, what's wrong with this guy? Right? So it is really, really important for each of you as you are listening, to the extent you are willing to be vulnerable, to that extent you can unlearn and actually make an emotional growth and a progress in that. That is something I want to just point out. And Kali has a very quick comment, then we'll move to other questions.
Yeah, before that, I'll just say a few minutes. We have passed our 90-minute marker. So, but we are here we have more questions to answer. And as long as there are audience willing to listen, and as long as the panelists have time to deliver the answers, we'll be here continuing with their chat. Okay, go
We'll
ahead,
take
Kali.
3-4 questions. Yeah, go ahead, Kali.
I just wanted to say that emotions are like, you want to think about them like water, right? If you don't let them flow out of you, they get stored within you, and it creates health problems in the long term. So a lot of like yoga therapy, a lot of trauma research is basically talking about releasing these stored emotions in our bodies, and yoga is a really big piece of that. So I want to sort of like completely normalize what Shivan's doing, because it is healthy for us to be able to express emotions in a healthy way, right? You get angry doesn't mean you bottle it up or punch a wall, right? You find a way to like constructively express that anger. You find a way to productively and constructively express that anger and get it out of your system, right? Don't hold it in, but don't punch someone, right? It's the same thing with sadness. It's the same thing with different emotions. My grandfather passed away last night, and I was fine until I saw my grandma. They've been married for 65 years, and when we just immediately, like, we saw each other and we just started to cry, and that was such, and there were no words, but I knew I was feeling her grief, so it's like, do that.
Can't hear, Kali. So maybe.
Yeah, you need to be able to do that, which is a really important piece and fun.
Thanks. We have a question that says, as a parent, we feel some kind of, some friends of our kids are not right for them, but the kid does not agree. How do we work this out with them? It's an extremely important question. Who would like to take this? Maybe all of us will not comment on it. Whoever is best suited, maybe we can take that. So if we believe that we have some opinions about friends of our kids, and we don't agree with, I mean, the kid doesn't agree. How do we deal with that? Dr. Vijay, you want to take that?
I'm not able to understand. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, as a parent, we feel some friends of our kids are not right for them, but our kid does not necessarily agree. How do we work it out with them?
This is something that comes up very often in my practice. Parents, as soon as they realize that another kid failed, is getting bad grades, or someone told them that the kid is using marijuana, or anything like that, immediately the parents don't want the kid to be friends with them. Now, inherently, if I have a friend, I don't want anyone telling me that I should not have that person as a friend. And once I develop a friendship, to say I'm not going to talk to you anymore because my parents said so is not a right thing to do. If we are confident that we have transferred good values to our children, in fact, our child might help the other kid. That's what one should do. You should teach the kid to help the other kid if the other kid is failing or making stupid decisions. So I think it's extremely important for the parent to have a chat with the child and say, hey, I am concerned you're moving about with this kid who is doing X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And let the child say, well, this is what it is. I am not using it, or I'm not doing that. And as long as I am crystal clear that I have imparted the values, I must trust my child. Of course, you want to keep an eye on them, but you must trust your child to make decisions.
Thank you. Dr. Priya, you grew up here and you probably went through the situation yourself. You have any thoughts on this? How did you deal with that? When your parents say that don't engage with this girl or this boy, or don't do that, what do you suggest as a person who grew up as well as a psychiatrist?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think that as a child growing up with certain friends that maybe my parents found might have been not a great influence or this or that, I think that what Dr. Vijay said is right in that I felt like I already had a pretty good value system that my parents had taught me, that even if they were to persuade me to do this, that, or the other thing, I felt like I could say no, or that I, did not feel so persuaded to do certain things. If I did and I tried something that maybe my parents didn't approve of, I quickly learned that that wasn't something that I felt good doing or felt right doing. I think that we all want to sort of rebel and explore and experiment with things, but I think ultimately, we also don't want to really disappoint or hurt our parents, especially if they've developed this value system within us. And I think I also learned from experience. I think a lot of the friends that I had that were kind of going down a path of destruction often were not the best friends to me. Initially I would think we were so close and we were best friends, and then they would do things to betray me or whatnot. And through experience, through life experience, I learned that maybe those friendships were not the most stable friendships in my life, and they quickly, sort of faded away from my life. So I think that I wouldn't have really known that if I didn't experience that myself. And if my parents just said, "Oh, don't spend time with these friends, it's over," I think I would have felt very angry, very bitter toward my parents for not allowing me to do that, and to not allowing me to be friends with people that I thought, I had a very deep friendship with. And only through those experiences in my life did I sort of learn what to look for in a friend, what's a good quality friend, how friendships are reciprocated, that kind of thing. So that's pretty much the personal experience. Professionally, I don't really work with children. I've done a little bit in my training. I work with adults, but I think that it is very challenging for parents to their children maybe interact with people that they don't feel are really good influences. But I think maybe parents are only one side of it also. The child who might be drinking alcohol or doing something, at a younger age, may still be a good friend in other ways. They may be teaching your child things about the world, about other cultures, backgrounds, experiences, other types of ways of being independent that you as a parent won't really know how to impart that on your children. So I think it's a mixed bag. I can say from my personal experience that exactly what Dr. Vijay said, the values that are instilled by your parents are carried along with you for the most part.
I just wanted to add one quick thing, and that is, if the parents impose their idea that they should not see the other kid, what they will do is inadvertently they will make them closer to that friend. And if that friend is really not good for them, you're already setting up for failure. So it is good to keep an eye on the kids, just in a broad sense, and at the same time let them figure it out. It's a learning experience. My son had two friends who went down a very dark path, and till today they're friends, very good friends, and slowly they came back. And so I think it's important. It's a learning experience for the kids.
To second that, for both of you, this was such a good thing. I think we as parents need to go into introspection. Why do we not like that child of this? I remember one parent saying that she asked her son about William, and it happened to be that the William is a African American descent. And so the child immediately said, "Are you racist, mom?" Well, there you go. You had to kind of think about it. Another one said that they found out from somewhere the 16-year-old was really not binging, but kind of experimenting with alcohol. So the father decided when he came home one day late, and he said, "Let's sit down and let's talk." He said, "It's late right now, Dad." "No, we can both have a drink." And the child was shocked. And he said, "Rather than you drinking somewhere else and getting into trouble, I'd like to show you that yes, you can, but there's a safe way to do certain things. Now, these are the ways we as parents have to learn a lot.
Excellent point. The last two questions came from the same person. They are connected with motivating children in two ways. One is motivating children in nature-related activities, hiking, mountains, and other things, and also motivating them to take on larger purpose, community activities, volunteer activities, instead of just doing them so that I can write them in the college application. How do we motivate them to genuinely do something that is voluntary and contributory? Any points on that? Who would like to take that first? So one is nature, second is higher purpose.
Being a pediatrician, I would say that kids will always learn with fun. And don't just say, "Oh, we have to go on a hike today for 2 miles." No, make it a project. Let's go strawberry picking or this, and then talk about strawberries and talk about how the nature and anything along that line. So they will learn. They have a higher purpose if they've learned these things in a fun way. You achieved your goal of going for a hike or a trek, but you also put that sense of, let's look at these flowers and let's name them, or something fun like that. It has to be that way children get engaged. We have to engage them.
Thank you. Anybody else?
If we want our kids to be interested in the outdoors, it has to start early as possible. Okay. Even as an infant, they can do the traveling, and I have seen mothers or fathers holding, carrying in the sack and going for hikes. So it is good to start extremely early if you want them to have that as a hobby. And like Dr. Gita said, if you have certain projects, so we go to this particular, I will go to all the forest preserves in DuPage County, and then we have a little map or something, and we start checking them off. When kids love to check things off, and if we start early and we start having those kinds of projects and slowly make it more and more complex, and encourage them to do certain projects in school and stuff like that, I think that that's going to help very much. Start early and show parents showing that by action, not by telling. The lesser they advise, the better it is in general. Even in this case, lecturing them about the, not doing video games, but going outside, all these lectures will have an opposite effect. And in terms of volunteer activities, it's again the same thing. The earlier that we start, the better it is. If parents do it as a regularly, weekly or monthly, something like that, and traditions are a very good way of teaching children. Just like we say, every Friday we go to a movie, or every Sunday we get an ice cream or something like that. Every a certain day, we will go and do some volunteering. The earlier you start, the better. And those traditions, if you do it on a regular basis, those things stay in people's minds. Just like I will make this particular sweet that my son likes on his birthday. That becomes a tradition. Every time he comes, I make that. Stays in his mind. So you need to make it stay in their minds as a positive experience, something looking forward to.
Thank you, Dr. Dr. Priya, you have anything? Or can I add something?
No, nothing really to add. I think that with nature, I think one of the big things about being in nature is disconnecting from technology. And I think that there's a lot of resistance from kids about disconnecting from their cell phones, their iPhones, whatever. And I think that really kind of developing a sort of fostering a sense of how that experience can be really fulfilling is going to be important, because they're not going to want to be away from their devices. So being able to make it into a project, a fun project, or learning more about the different trees and leaves and flowers and insects and all of those things are really the way to I think encourage the kids to do it. And then I think with time they'll learn to appreciate that experience and that time away from their electronics.
I also found that, considering that, let us say you have not done that, children are already teenagers or children are older, then what I find sometimes is very helpful is I take on my projects. And then if they want to spend time with me, if they want to talk to, I will invite them on my project. Because, if they are teenagers or if they are beyond teenagers, they're not interested in I suggesting projects to them. But if I can invite them on my project, like right now, I just said, I'm going to go to Everest Base Camp in October. Now, whenever I want to do something, I ask my daughter if she's visiting here, or my son or somebody else. So then I say, would you like to come with me? Would you like to give me company? Would you like to do that? And then I talk about, or I stop to take photograph, or we talk about a tree or a bird or something. That is one thing I found. Second thing is, if you already know they want to do volunteer activities, they want to do something for the college applications, it's fine. Start with that first. So the short-term goal may be college application, but when they are writing that application, when they are doing, it is not just their action, but their leadership, their perspective, their point of view. So that is where, if we can start thinking about and helping them to identify why, what, where, and how, and who. I found asking them to develop this journalistic inquiry. So to say that something like why answers the question purpose. Why are you doing it? And asking them, multiple times. Why do you want to do this? Okay, fine. You want to apply for, what do you call your application, college application, you want to do this activity. But why did you choose this particular activity? Why not that activity? Then you connect their learning style, their passion and interests. And then once you know a little bit more about, they are interested in a particular kind of passion. Let us say they are interested in music. They are interested in anime. You said Japanese cartoons in your stuff they want to look at. Maybe you can encourage them to create the cartoons of their own. Or you can say, just like a Japanese animation cartoons, can you create Chicago animation cartoons, Boston animation cartoons? Can you actually add some material? Can you collect something? So if you can find a way to use their passion and use as a methodology short-term benefits, medium-term interests and passions, and longer-term over time, they might develop some of that type of stuff. So 3 points then. First, you have to do it. Second, you need to have a higher purpose and they need to see you doing it. Second and third is engage them through their passion to what you think you can do with a short-term goal to a longer-term benefit. These are some thoughts that I have that I really want to take the time to now close the panel. I think there have been excellent comments made by Dr. Gita, Dr. Vijay, Dr. Priya, Kali, Sivam on the aspects of how professionally you can think about what have these professionals learned in their practice working with parents and some of them working with children. What are some of the issues that they have identified with Indian Americans? What do we need to deal as parents to take care of our children? I know specifically in this, we have given advice to the parents. The next session that we take on, we will try to look at how we address it from children's perspective. What are some advice? What are some of the things that children should do better? And we will have more of a dialogue and we'll develop it. And if you have any ideas to develop the 5th part of this series, and if you have some thoughts on what we should pay attention to, or there's some specific thoughts that you have or you want to help out, please let us know. webinars@northsouth.com, and it will be what you call, I'll be direct in my duty if I don't thank Dr. Vijay Susarla for putting together this wonderful seminar and sending out the topic and questions to all the panelists, and Dr. Priya for participating, Dr. Kali and Dr. Gita, especially Dr. Gita and Dr. Kali going through the family situations very immediately and then making time for it. We are extra grateful for all of you, and for all of you audience who have attended, appreciate you staying till the end and ask very important and open and questions that make you vulnerable. You have been able to express it, and thank you for participating as usual. And finally, let me thank Desi Vijay for being the continuous person who has been facilitating and who has provided the structure and the process and the continuity for it. Thank you very much. In addition to that, we have Sai Rachakonda, Savita, Dr. Chitturi, Dr. Balu. There are many people who have been very passionate about this topic, and thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Maybe in about between a month and a half time, we'll come back to you. Thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of the Sunday. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Prasad, for such a wonderful session. And even though we went overboard with another half hour, but thanks for all the panelists for being patient. Thanks for all the attendees being patient, listening to all these things. This is the important topic we really want to pursue more, and we need your participation also in this. We just don't want the one-way communications. Please express your thoughts. Let me know at webinars@northsouth.org, and we will pursue those things again.